Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits. Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks, congratulations! You can find us all over the place at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address, and there is a Facebook page appropriately called Primus Tracks. It is maintained by the man who essentially lives on the 39th floor of Primus Tracks Towers, Mexico City edition. It's Frankie Berestein.
Hi, Josh. Listeners, patrons,
Primates, lizards, invertebrates. It doesn't matter. We're here for you. Enjoy Primus Tracks. Hey, Frankie, we are starting a new record, and we're actually taking it track by track. This is the first record we've done that to in quite some time.
Oh yes, it's been a while.
It has, and we are diving into the 2001 effort by a little band called Oysterhead and their record, The Grand Pecking Order. Of course, we have to talk about the band itself and its origins, because there is quite a long story to Oysterhead, and we're going to get to that today. We're going to talk about the first track as well, Little Faces. In a little bit, Frankie, we're going to get some help with that one. But first, some miscellaneous debris. Last time, Frankie, we wrapped up the 2023 Frog Brigade experience. We talked about the summer and October tours, talked quite at length about song selections and that sort of thing. And you told all of us that Madness is a band worth our time?
Yes, Madness is really cool.
To get back on that Madness train, I have some miscellaneous debris about that band. And I have to give credit to Michael Wendell, who on one of the show threads somewhere where I post these things, said the following: Madness had a little music video segment in the TV show The Young Ones. Unless, of course, samples a line from The Young Ones at the end of Los Bastardos, or during Los Bastardos. You just called me a bastard, didn't you? Which you and I know very well. I didn't say that right. Let me do that again. You just called me a bastard, didn't you? Micah says, there's your 2 or 3 degrees from Primus. So Les had to have seen the Madness video segment on The Young Ones and learn more about that band from one of his favorite TV shows of all time. How about that, Frankie?
Fantastic piece of debris. Everything is connected in the end.
It really is. So that's probably the impetus for Les finding a tune like One Step Beyond and very much enjoying it and soon covering it with the Frog Brigade over the years. If you have a piece of miscellaneous debris, if we miss something, it happens. If we get something wrong, mostly me. If something seems askew, if you would like to augment anything we have to say here on the podcast, you can send an email or a DM to us at any of our socials or primustrackspod@gmail.com. You can put miscellaneous debris in the subject line, or you can just put something like, Josh was wrong, and we'll read it right here on the air. Time for Oysterhead, Frankie. I'm going to get in the way back machine and go back to the year 2000.
Let's go.
When Oysterhead first foisted itself upon the world, and I know you are well-versed in this band's history, and you're going to educate us.
This is one of those occasions where you have a supergroup that does not actually require to have a ton of members. You have 3 people on stage, legendary in their own right, and they are performing music that otherwise they would not create either by themselves or with other people. So just like Les said at one point that he makes music with Primus that he doesn't make with anyone else, Oysterhead is totally unique in the same way. Can you imagine any of those songs being created with any of the other musicians that Les works with? It is absolutely impossible. Just like nothing sounds like the Riddles Are Abound Tonight album.
Yeah.
Nothing else in Les Claypool's catalog sounds like the Grand Pecking Order. It's completely unique in its own right. Now, is it because of Trey Anastasio? Is it because of the way that Stewart Copeland plays drums? Is it because of the democracy in the band, in the way that everybody gets to sing a track, everybody gets to compose a track? Is it because of the way Les adapts to the other 2 players? what makes Oysterhead unique exactly? What is your perspective, Josh?
I think you're onto something there. The individuals that form the collective and have a more or less equal say in what the music sounds like and the direction it goes in is, I think those are all parts of the whole. And I know you're going to go more into depth on how they got together in 2000 for this one-off Super Jam thing, but I think that's another thing to think about is these guys got together and goofed around and even wrote semblances of tunes over a couple of weeks before this first Oysterhead performance in the year 2000 at this Super Jam event. And the idea that those tunes and those jams marinated for a while before they came back around to making a record together, I think also had something to do with it. So they were able to create some footage to choose bits and pieces from before they went into the barn out at Trey's place and knocked out the Grand Pecking Order. So it wasn't just three guys meeting in a studio and trying to figure it out. They already had some common ground. But they all, of course, bring their unique and individual voices to the party.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with everything that you said. And it is worthwhile pointing out that Oysterhead was never intended to be a long-term project.
Right.
So Superfly asked Les to assemble a band for the New Orleans Jazz Festival. Les got in touch with Trey. They agreed Stewart Copeland was a mutual hero they wanted to perform with, and they assembled enough original material to actually perform a set that had a balance between new songs, covers, and improvisation.
Yeah. I want to pause you there, Frankie, because the way Les has told that story over the years, Trey was in a roundabout way trying not to do the event by saying, "Oh yeah, I've always wanted to do a band with you and Stewart Copeland." And Les essentially calls Trey's bluff and said, "Oh, I know Stewart Copeland. I can get him." And lo and behold, he did. And so Trey, his hand was forced into participating. And I don't know how apocryphal that is, and I don't know how willing Trey was in the first place, but the way Les tells it, he kind of almost tricked Trey into doing it after he gave him that Stewart Copeland line. And the other thing we should point out is Stewart Copeland says at that point in time, he had not played a drum kit in years, because, of course, Stewart, famous for his work with the Police, but when that band went to shambles, I believe Stewart went into composition for movies, I think, and he was doing a lot of non-drum kit percussion as well as composition, if I recall.
As you pointed out, Les called Trey's bluff, and maybe Trey should have noticed that Les had actually worked with Stewart before.
That's right.
It was not like he was completely inaccessible. I mean, they were already acquainted with each other.
Yeah, Stewart having produced Dirty Drowning Man on the Primus record Antipop, of course.
Exactly. Well, it was intended to be a one-off. They assembled enough material for it to be a pretty interesting set that they could offer the audience. Tickets were scalped for up to $2,000. Les actually talked about it during the performance. He said, and I quote, "People paid a shitload of money to be here." And after that, I guess they realized that the material they assembled was too good to leave it as a one-off, right? So next thing you know, they got into the studio and we got a studio record.
Right. So that came many months later. So of course there was a gestation because Les almost immediately after this Oysterhead experience in 2000, he's off doing the Frog Brigade. So he's his mind is elsewhere. But he's just entering this jam world that Trey Anastasio, of course, of Fish fame, had been in for quite some time and had built quite a following. And I got to imagine the people that were scalping those tickets, but also paying a massive amount of money for those tickets, whether it was that one-off show or the subsequent tour in 2001, mostly Fish fans.
It is also worthwhile noting that they did TV appearances. They performed Aussie Silver Floating with Conan O'Brien. Mm-hmm. They did the HBO Reverb special. For something that was meant to be a one-off, it actually became not only a high-profile band in the sense that they were making these kind of appearances, which Les doesn't do that frequently with his music. They also turn to be one of the most coveted Claypool projects in the sense that many of us are still waiting for our chance to see them.
Yeah, there is a certain rarity to their live performances. I made a list here, Frankie, of years and number of performances. And this gets me because over 23 years, we only have 26 live performances from Oysterhead. So it is possibly the most rare reoccurring project that Les Claypool has ever been involved with. So check out this list. Year 2000, one live performance. That would be the first live performance down at the Superfly Productions Jazz Fest. In 2001, after the release of Grand Pecking Order, 20 shows over the course of a month and a half. Then 5 years go by, and they reassemble for a special performance at Bonnaroo in 2006. 14 years go by, Frankie. People grow up, go their separate ways. People change. People find new pursuits. But Oysterhead finds their way back together in 2020 for a couple of shows. And then one more in 2021. In early 2022, Oysterhead set out on the road and was able to perform a grand total of one show. Frankie, I don't know, I've been to one or two of these VIP things, and I think every time I've been to one of these, I'm curious if this is your experience too, there's always an Oysterhead question.
Yeah.
People, they want this band to create new material, they want this band to perform live, and as you intimated earlier, people want that experience. They have it on their checklist. The stock answer is, I've heard Les say, I'm busy, Stewart's busy, Trey's busy, we'll figure it out when we can.
But yeah, it's always on the table. So I'm never going to give out hope that I'll get to see Oysterhead at some point. I forgot to say, Josh, that a little additional information. As I mentioned, they assembled this original material for the set, right? Lots of improvisation. We're going to go deeper into that show in a little bit, but I just want to point out that apparently a fair share of the lyrics were written backstage at the last minute prior to the show. And the band was not precisely thrilled with the performance. Stewart Copeland actually described it as a train wreck. I can think of a few reasons why he feels that way. But he listened to the live recording and he sent the tapes to Trey because he was convinced that they could do something with the project. That was also one of the stepping stones in order for the band to actually create the album and tour a little more extensively. Like I said, they probably discovered the potential in those performances from that show. I mean, if you listen to the show, they are the ones who were there and performed it. I guess they believe it was not up to their standards, but as a listener, I believe the tracks on that show are diamonds in the rough. You can definitely see flashes of genius in some of those passages. So I am really glad that they decided to give it another go. Otherwise, we would have like this lone, bizarre performance in Les Claypool's catalog, but it actually evolved into something else. And now we can actually compare what the final songs sound like versus what was performed at that show. So just before I forget, Josh, because this is something that I guess not a lot of people are aware about, besides the tracks included on the album, there's also Lobotomies 1 and 2. These are actually a combination, well, they are like hybrids of studio jamming plus live recordings that were overdubbed and rearranged by Stewart Copeland into compositions. And they were added to the Oysterhead website back in the day for streaming. I do have both Lobotomies, so I guess we could sample them when we reach the end of the record.
Why not? Let's reveal all secrets of Oysterhead.
Yes, indeed. Can I tell you a little bit about that first performance?
Please.
So as we mentioned, it happened at the Jazz Festival in New Orleans. The date, May 4th, 2000. Here's the set list that lucky attendants got that night. I Am Oysterhead. So we're going to sample that tonight because I Am Oysterhead eventually evolved into Little Faces on the Grand Pecking Order record. Of course, we need to point out that all of the songs in this set, at least the original material, all of those songs have lyrics that, as we mentioned, were either written prior to the show or improvised on the spot. So what we get on the record is completely different to what we hear on this set.
Right.
So we have I Am Oysterhead. I can see why this was modified, Josh. I mean, I Am Oysterhead and then Mr. Oysterhead, you have two songs which are basically dealing with the same subject, right?
Makes sense to me. To stay on theme for the jammy festival, for the one-off. However, you probably want to diversify when you're making a record.
Exactly. So they opened the set with I Am Oysterhead, to make a statement. Mm-hmm. They continued with Mr. Oysterhead, which would become one of the, how can we say it? The theme song of the band.
Yeah.
And Les has described it as a song with a lot of bravado. We'll actually go into that when we reach the track. Then they did a jam, which transformed into Rubberneck Lions. Then they had another jam. Well, it's labeled Wrong Song Jam. The reason for that is that Les cued Trey and Stewart to perform Owner of the World, but Stewart actually started playing the drum beat of what would become Pseudo-Suicide.
Yeah.
And Les actually had to stop the performance to point out that Stewart was playing the wrong song. But he makes it in a really respectful and really funny way. Then we get to Owner of the World, followed by Blue Ginger, Happiness in My Pants, Wildwood Weed, Happiness in My Pants concluded, Sinking Down, Pseudo-Suicide, epic version of Pseudo-Suicide, which actually contains elements of Reba and Jerry Was a Race Car Driver. Mm-hmm. The encore was Immigrant Song, which we actually sampled many moons ago on this show when we did our covers extravaganza. I remember that it didn't go down so well with the Special Boys. The Israelites, All Day and All Night, and the final song of the night was House of the Rising Sun. So quite a cover-heavy set, not unlike what they would do during the tour. My Generation also became one of the recurrent covers during the 2001 tour. So Oysterhead never had any issue with mixing covers with their original material. And it's interesting because these are songs that speak to them, right, on some level. So
right.
Maybe some were picked by Les, some were picked by Trey, or all three of them at the same time, but it's kind of a tapestry of what Oysterhead is about and the sounds that influenced the group. Now, another thing that I want to point out about this New Orleans set, besides the heavy modifications in the lyrics, a lot of these tracks also were edited musically. You will hear in them a lot of passages that were not actually recorded for the studio versions on the album. A notable example would be Pseudo-Suicide. It has some really, really amazing passages on the show that were not replicated for the studio cut. Right. So this is a fascinating concert. It's a really fascinating document of how one of Les Claypool's projects evolved into a record and then a tour. But we get this preliminary look at the rough ideas performed on the spot, which is something that doesn't happen that frequently with Les, right? We know that he goes away, he creates the music, and then he unleashes that music upon the world when it's ready.
Yeah, it's really cool to see what was selected, what was discarded, and what eventually became the Grand Pecking Order, which they felt was the best representation of the three of themselves. Speaking of the Grand Pecking Order, Frankie, let's take a look at a few album credits. So, of course, This comes out on 2001, Elektra Records. It's released on CD widely and has a limited vinyl release. You have the number on that. I can't recall.
So according to what I've read online, Josh, we need to get some clear sources. I'm working on that, but what I've read online from various people is that apparently it was limited to around 500 copies, and it was sold at the merch stands of the 2001 tour.
Okay.
So there is a possibility that it didn't actually make it to retail. Now, we would like to ask our listeners for help. Did any of you actually ever see this record available for sale at a record store? Please share your information with us, because what I've read online is that it was a merch exclusive. I mean, it's either that or the fact that it had to be an extremely limited pressing, because we're talking about a year and an era where vinyl was considerably less popular than CD. Mm-hmm. I can see how they would promote the CD heavily and the vinyl would be pressed in very limited quantities.
And more of a niche thing then than it is now, which is strange to say because vinyl is the best-selling physical media format probably in North America by far anymore. Strange.
I am so glad I got this record. I paid $300 for my copy, and I was pleasantly surprised when it arrived because my copy still has the shrink wrap. Now, you know that it's not healthy to keep your records in the shrink wrap, but this one is not sealed. So it's actually open on the side so you can slip out the record, but the seller preserved the shrink wrap. So I have the hype sticker. Yeah, that makes it supremely cool. And it's mint. Whoever the owner was took really amazing care of this item. So I can say proudly that I have a mint copy of the Grand Pecking Order on vinyl. And another of my dreams came true, Josh, because this album was actually released in Japan.
Oh, very good. You have a Japanese edition.
I do have my Japanese edition, which was released on Digipack with an OB, and as a little bonus for Japan, it comes with a sticker. It's worth pointing out, Josh, that all standard copies of this album came on Digipack, but it was actually sold in Australia in a super jewel case.
So I assume you have that one too.
Yes. So I got all bases covered in terms of the Oysterhead released.
I took the college student's way out and went down to the university bookstore upon release, picked this up on CD for a low price, and was quite satisfied with that. You know, the collector in me thinks, well, I should probably hunt those down, but it's a pretty penny anymore.
And there's a hefty want list on Discogs. So the ratio is 264 people claim to have it versus 1,544 people after a copy.
Basic economics at play with Oysterhead. We should mention there is a European pressing that's been making its way over here, and I believe it's completely unofficial. And
completely.
A lot of people have been picking those up. They say they sound great, and they're getting them for, well, much less comparatively than they would that original vinyl. So if you're into that sort of thing and you've got one and you're happy with it, good for you. Let's take a look at some of these record credits, Frankie. It's quite fascinating. We're going to hear some familiar names. We also get our music and lyrics credit for every track. Of course, Oysterhead would be Trey Anastasio on guitar, Les Claypool on bass, Stewart Copeland on drums and percussion. Because we're going to talk about Little Faces, I'll toss that one out there right now. That's music by Oysterhead, lyrics by Anastasio and Claypool. But when we look at the album credits, the three guys in the band produced the record, and it was mixed by our pal Toby Wright,
yes.
Frankie.
Hi, Toby.
Who produced Rhinoplasty and mixed Antipop. So he's got a nice little streak here of working with Les, doing the mixing on the Oysterhead record. And of course, as a generalized statement, this record sounds great. I love the sonic quality of it. And the mix with all the layering that this band does, I think Toby does a fantastic job with it. This record was recorded at the Barn in Vermont. That's Trey's place in April of 2001, and that was recorded by Oz Fritz. That's a name we should know. Of course, he has a song dedicated to him on the record as well. This was mastered at Markison Mastering by Stephen Markison. I always look for his name because I think every single recording that Les has ever been a part of has been mastered by Stephen Markison. It's very interesting. And here's a credit, Frankie. Production assistant, Brad Sands.
Yes, we know that Brad used to work with Fish, right?
He was in that camp for a while, and he also is a production assistant here. Just a scant few years later, he would end up managing Les Claypool.
Pretty cool. Can I point something out about the artwork, Josh?
Please.
It's a painting by Tim Slowinski.
Mm-hmm.
Tim has a portfolio online through his official website. You can spend there hours looking at his art. It's really, really amazing. Incredibly unique style, instantly recognizable. And it's no wonder going through his catalog to notice that the vast majority of the paintings are sold. The website divides the work in categories. You have fatties, suburbs, Wall Street, business, religion, politics, corporate, industry, food, animals, medical, family, and insults. So if you go over to the industry section, that's where you'll find our fantastic Oysterhead artwork, which is titled adequately Oysterhead. It's an acrylic on canvas measuring 32 by 34 inches, and it is sold. So
wow.
Somebody out there has this incredible piece of art in their collection. And if you head over to the suburbs section, you'll find my favorite Slowinski piece, which is called Buy More. Give me a second. Let me confirm that. Yeah, so this is called Buy More Mart.
Very good. And quite fetching artwork it is, actually, on the cover and throughout your liner notes. He definitely has a distinct style that I think actually plays well with the Oysterhead aesthetic. So good on Tim Slowinski. We should also point out that really cool stylized logo on your Oysterhead CD, not the one you see on the cover art, but the one you see on the actual CD with the stylized backwards Y, is by Vance Kelly, who also did the artwork for the first couple Flying Frog Brigade releases and has done many a Primus gig poster over the years. But all of that great art by Tim Slowinski and logo designed by Vance Kelly was laid out for this release by our good pal Zoltron. So there's another familiar name. So there's some familiar names running down the credits list on this record. There are also some unfamiliar names to me, but I would imagine many of the people that were assisting in the recording were Fish crew guys, and that's a world with which I am not at all familiar. But I should say this, Frankie, and I'm curious about your take on this. Sure, I knew the Police. They had been around for some time. As far as pop music goes, it's some of the best pop music you're ever going to hear. And so Stewart Copeland, with his, just that snare. Everybody always talks about that snare sound, right? So you just know it's him hitting it. So I remember when this was announced that I thought, oh, Stewart Copeland, cool. He produced Dirty Drowning Man. He's a great drummer. They said Trey Anastasio. And I tried. I honestly tried with Fish in my college years. What better time to try, right? It just didn't go down right. I still don't get it. And that's not to say, Fish sucks or I hate Fish. I'm just not into it. So there are some elements of this record, because one of the guys in Fish is in it, I suppose, that just don't speak to me. But what about you, Frankie? Are you getting into the Fish at all?
The Police. I admire and I respect their work tremendously. We are familiar with their hits. We are familiar with their most popular songs, but their records as a whole experience are fascinating. And then we go into the topic of Sting. I think he's a controversial figure in the sense that he doesn't put out the records that people want him to put out. Mm-hmm. He's the kind of artist that does whatever he wants, and you can vibe with it, or you can choose to listen to something else. For some reason, every time that I've traveled internationally, Sting has put out a new album, which is available to listen on the planes. So I've been able to listen to a lot of his releases on airplanes. And, you know, I'm not a huge fan, but there's always at least 2 or 3 songs that I will really enjoy and I will incorporate to my playlist. So mad respect for Stewart Copeland, The Police, and Sting. Now, in terms of Fish, I am not a huge fan of their music, but I find the whole phenomena fascinating. You know, the way that they sell out consecutive nights at huge venues, the way they keep doing those concerts here at the beach in Mexico year after year for incredibly expensive prices in terms of traveling, booking, and packages, and they consistently sell out year after year. I find the whole movement really interesting. Whatever you and I are not picking up in their music, it's compelling enough for a lot of people to follow them with such dedication and such passion.
Oh, yeah.
What I do find interesting about Phish is how they make everything they do in terms of live performances instantly available to their audiences. So I think that is something a lot of us feel jealous about, imagine following a band that offers you every single show they perform for sale. That is something that I think Phish do quite right. Now, do I listen to Trey Anastasio outside of the context of Oysterhead? No, I do not. I feel that what he brings to the table for Oysterhead is fantastic, is adequate, but the music that he makes is not the kind of music that speaks to me. Show me Les Claypool jamming a song for 20 minutes with the Frog Brigade and I'm totally into it. But I just cannot listen to a 30-minute version of Reba because I don't even like the studio version to begin with.
Yeah. Well, so we're of similar minds here going into this Oysterhead record, and this is one. I think I've caught myself saying this a lot lately. This is a record I've not heard in quite some time, and that's by choice. I just have not picked it up and put it on. So this will be a rediscovery phase for me. I have a feeling you listen to it much more often than I do.
It's on heavy rotation. I enjoyed quite a bit, but I'll tell you something about it. It wasn't an instant pleasure. It took me a really long time. So let's look at some numbers. I got into Primus in 2003. For many years, the only thing that appealed to me about Oysterhead was Shadow of a Man because of the performance that was included in the 5 Gallons of Diesel DVD. So it wasn't until 2016. Wow.
Huh.
That's such a long time. It wasn't until 2016 that I actually sat down and I watched the Bonnaroo. Can you make the voice, please?
Bonnaroo.
2006 performance. And I listened attentively. And that's when I said, you know what? There's something interesting going on here. And then I loaded the CD onto my computer and I started listening to the record, attentively. Little by little, I started to get acquainted with each song until I discovered that I couldn't get some of those songs out of my head. I would be doing stuff and passages from songs just came to my mind. So that's when I realized that those songs had found their way into my subconsciousness. And by 2017, I was playing the record sometimes daily, but most of the time weekly. And now, I know every corner of the album. I am familiar with every single note. It's practically ingrained in my DNA, but it took that long for me to actually sit down and play it. It's really amazing how after years of listening to an artist, you suddenly discover something that you hadn't paid attention to before. So I'm glad Oysterhead took that long to sink in because it was exciting to listen to the album when I really got into it. That kind of pleasure is priceless.
Beautiful. This might seem like a strange question, Frankie, but can we get a live history on each one of these tracks from the record, given that we only have 26 Oysterhead shows and 25 of them when they were playing organized material?
Absolutely. In terms of Little Faces, as we mentioned, the track was premiered as I Am Oysterhead in 2000, and after that, it was performed throughout the 2001 tour. It was then performed at the reunion show of 2006, and then it was performed at both Denver dates of 2020 the Peach Festival in 2021, and in Atlanta in 2022 at the Centennial Olympic Park. So we could say that Little Faces is a guarantee at the live concerts.
I have a feeling that's going to be the trend through this record. But I'm looking forward to the surprise of one of these, not being performed 25, 26 times. As mentioned before, opening track of Grand Pecking Order, Little Faces, 4 minutes and 57 seconds, music by Oysterhead, lyrics by Trey Anastasio and Les Claypool. And I actually wanted to start with the lyrics, Frankie, because we're now in a record in which Les is writing lyrics, but he's not writing all of the lyrics. In fact, he's co-writing lyrics, I would imagine for the first time in his career. It really shows, especially in this track. The Little Faces and the lyrical content, I sum up with the phrase, I treasure the innocence of children, because Les had 2 young kids at this point. I think Trey had a kid or 2 that were pretty young. As the story goes, these guys were bonding over fatherhood, correct?
Yes, that's right.
They have this in common, and they start writing lyrics about just all the things kids do. And of course, kids do things that adults wouldn't think to do or want them to do. These lyrics look very fondly upon the actions of these kids. And the lyrics actually have an interesting structure, and I think that comes from Trey because they are not structured in such a way as you would normally get from Les. However, the imagery, I think, is really where they both contribute. And I'm not going to do the cadence and the rhythm of the lyrics, but as they're presented on the record, but I do want to read them as if they were prose, because you're going to hear this pattern that it's just not one that's typical of Les. Verse 1, in the dawn when my toes are cold, they spread their little trinkets on the ground. In the hall, by the closet door, they creep into my bed without a sound. On a cube, in a plastic egg, 100 fabric figures in a pile. Da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. So those 3 lines get longer, longer, longer. In the dawn, when my toes are cold, they spread their little trinkets on the ground. That is, Les usually keeps his couplets pretty uniform.
Yeah.
He loves his enjambment, though, and we do get a little bit of that here in the 3rd line of each of these 3-line stanzas. And then in the 2nd verse, same thing. Tiny doors for walking through, while sticky fingers clutch forbidden things. And the phone for talking through. They often pull the cable when it rings. Once again, all these actions, all these things little kids do, probably without thinking about it, and these are all looked upon fondly by our narrator or narrators, Les and Trey. So I'm really into the structure of those, those stanzas, those 3-line stanzas. They all have that pattern, in the blank, on a blank. It's really kind of cute, kind of wholesome that they are, singing about little kids, their kids creeping into bed with their parents before their parents get up, getting their grubby little hands on everything, how they act when they're listening to bedtime stories or talking about monsters under the bed. And that's referenced, of course, in the lyrics. So I just, of course, I'm thinking, well, Les read the Rainbow Goblins to his kid. So yeah, maybe that's presaging that here.
Yeah.
And watching them sleep. Like they're singing about watching their kids sleep, which, on the surface, it's creepy to watch somebody sleep. But when you're watching your baby or your kid sleep, it's totally fine. It's called Little Faces, but you could also almost call it Little Moments, because these are things that these guys are going to treasure about their kids for the rest of their lives.
Agreed. That's a great interpretation.
Yeah.
When you were reading the lyrics, I was impressed by how they flow as a piece of text. They have this really interesting cadence when they are backed by the music, but when you were reading them, it reads like poetry.
Sinking ships on a foamy sea that roll and tumble slowly from the motion of their filthy little hands. There's that enjambment on that 3rd line. Trey fits in a lot of syllables there, but you're absolutely right. It does. This could be set to music as it is, or you could read it like Robert Frost on an old recording. And it works. It works both ways. And then we get the repetition of Little Faces in the chorus. Keep no track of time, speaking out in rhyme, smiling in my mind. So we get that long I rhyme at the end of those 3. lines with the repetition of little faces, and that sounds more like something Les would do. But we can hear the contributions of the two lyric writers. They're really interesting lyrics, and they're just writing about their cute kids. To talk about the music, Frankie, we are joined by a young man who's joined us before, and he is brave enough to talk about Oysterhead, and he brought his bass along, which is probably the instrument somebody would bring along when they're talking about Oysterhead on Primus Tracks. Welcome back to Primus Tracks, Lalo Fierro.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really, really nice. Yeah, it's a pleasure for me.
And for us as well. And you're here this time to talk about Oysterhead. Lalo, as an experienced and accomplished bass player, what do you like about the Oysterhead album?
I like the concept of Oysterhead because it was made in the time of the jam bands.
Uh-huh.
So the music is not preconceived, and it feels it's flowing all the time. So it's not a pressure of see what I can do. It's just three friends having fun playing music. So I don't feel any one of the involved, Trey Anastasio, Les Claypool, or Stewart Copeland, want to impress the other guys. So they just playing, and I like that it's playing music in Spanish is tocar música, but I prefer in English because you say play music is jugar música, like you play football or play baseball,
like a game.
Yeah, it's a game. It's a game.
When I learned that there were two ways to say to play, jugar and tocar, that they're so different, even though to me, as a native English speaker, they were the concept was the same, but in Espanol they're different. That's a great point. And so these three are playing like they're playing a game.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you have to choose in your partners of your team.
Yeah.
You have to enjoy and all that.
They're teammates, yes. They're not opponents. Thank goodness. Oh, that's a deep thought on that. I appreciate that. It's great to build that idea for this record because, as Frankie established earlier, these guys played one show and jammed a handful of times before creating this record. So they didn't really know each other very well. And Lalo, you've played with many musicians over your years. When you meet a new person to play with, jugar with, not tocar, how do you establish a musical relationship with a new person, I guess?
Oh, it's a good question because the human being is always the first impression is for your sight, for you what you see. So many times the cover of the book cheats you or don't tell you that the person, but every time I meet a new musician, I like to talk about his influences.
Okay.
And if we have an artist or musician we have in common, that is a common ground to start to play. Or, maybe a genre in special, jazz or funk or something, a blues, a simple blues, it tells you about a lot of the person that you are playing with. So I like to talk with the person and ask him his influences or favorite artists. Obviously, a jam is necessary. It's necessary to meet the other people.
But there are things you can talk about before playing one note, so that you can get to know that person better. That's great. I don't play music with other people because I I'm horrible at it. So they, those are experiences I don't get to have, and that's okay. But it's great to hear your approach. Well, with that in mind, Little Faces is a really interesting track to me in that it's the first exposure, I suppose, of these three men creating something together on this record. And I'm going to play the first part of the track because what they do really well, and I definitely, of course, want to hear your interpretation, Lalo. Yeah. What they do really well is they build layers on this record. On a Primus record, you don't get a bunch of different guitar layers or bass layers, but this record is an exception, especially for something that Les has done.
Today I was listening to a fancy band show from 2006. You know that One Better is one of my favorite tracks. And when the song was over, I noticed something strange in the drumming, because when they performed that song live, the conclusion is really complex. It's a really, really amazing moment in the track. But it sounded different. And I thought, why was that part played differently? And I checked the lineup, and it was Jay on drums. It was not Paolo Baldi. So we also mentioned how if Herb had played Hennepin Crawler, it would have been something completely different. And the reason that Hennepin Crawler is so busy right off the gate is because Jay Lane is a drummer. And why do the drums sound the way they sound on the Brown album? Because it's Brain. So when it comes to the drumming on any Les project, you can instantly recognize who's playing. And what we're about to hear is something that could not have been performed by anyone else other than Stewart Copeland.
Especially when you hear that snare sound.
That snare, yeah.
Trey and Stu making a really nice groove, and then Les enters with his bass line, and Lalo, ¿Qué piensas? Help us out with Les's bass line here.
What I think is the track starts with Stewart doing a paradiddle exercise with the snare drum and the hi-hats in the only way he can do it. So it's marvelous. And then we hear Trey with starting the atmosphere, with the rare sounds and weird sounds. Let's start to feel and make some noises for what is coming.
Yeah. When he enters, he plays a really neat bass line, actually. And if you don't mind showing us the lick he plays. Yeah.
I mind.
You mind? Is it difficult?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I was listening the track again and again. I always check the live videos to give me an idea because Les can play all the fingerboard. So he always surprised me because I was thinking in my first impression that he was playing in the low part, but no, he's playing. And the bass players, when we slap, we know that hard part of the fingerboard is about the 12th.
Okay.
The 12th. And I was thinking that he was but no, when I checked all the videos in YouTube, and he was playing in the hardest way possible. He was. The tune is in E minor, but let's always get out of the harmony, the traditional harmony.
Yeah.
So he something like to put the pulse of the song. To hear is easy, but it next is very hard. He made the relative major of E minor is G major, so he started with E and B. He start to having fun with he has a amazing thumb, so he always bounce the and he start with E B. He attacks the relative major G and B, and he starts to descending in diminished fifth.
Okay.
The diminished fifth in F sharp with C, F and B, and he always boom, 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 and I really enjoy watching him play because the pulse he made it look so simple, so easy, because you only saw this motion, boom, 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 but you don't watch he changed the moment of his arm. No, he's always boom, 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 boom. And you can see the live videos. The three of them, they have the biggest smile I've ever seen.
Yeah.
The three, yeah.
What I'm hearing is he's playing what look like quarter notes, bomb, 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 but then he's sneaking in.
Yeah.
Even though his hand looks like it's doing this, like coming way off the string, then he's sneaking in the with just one, like seemingly one strike, but he's got a really fast thumb, right?
Yeah, you just see up and down, but in between it's a lot of sneaking the what you say.
Yeah. Wow. Does it wear you out your thumb?
It's more mental because Les always force you mentally and physically because he's a natural artist because one time I can talk with him and I ask him how he can imagine a line be like Tommy the Cat or Jerry was a race car driver, and he I just don't know. I just flow and I just play, and I can't understand that because he's a natural artist.
So
it's like a Picasso or Dali on the bass.
Yeah, you can't. It's hard to explain, isn't it?
Yeah, and in another language, it's harder.
Yeah, even harder. But it's almost any artist it's probably difficult to explain how you create because it feels natural. It just happens.
For him, it's natural.
Yeah.
For me, it's just why, how, that kind of question.
Yeah. So the opening bass part is very demanding. But in the verses, he pulls back some, correct? It's a little more, is it simpler?
Very, a lot simpler. When Frankie asked me to do this chat with you, I was searching for the song. The first song I heard was Little Faces, and I said, it's nice, it's not so hard, so that's okay. Well, I was so wrong. Yes, Les made look so simple, but it's not. But yeah, in the chorus is the bass is you can feel they are enjoying the time because, like I said before, they don't try to impress anybody, just enjoying playing for themselves.
So the chorus that you just pointed to with that progression, It sounds like something Les would play. However, I also think this, and Frankie, we talked about this too. This is where I think Trey contributes a lot because it sounds like it's going in a different direction than a Les Claypool song.
Absolutely.
It's building something different. And I don't know if you can help describe why it is different, Lalo, but
Stewart Copeland is a legend. He's a living legend. When you hear Primus, you hear 70 or 80% of the song is Les.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not in Oysterhead. You can feel it's three equal parts. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's a game, tension and release, all the song. Yeah. You feel some alivio, ¿cómo se dice?
Relief.
Yeah.
You feel the relief.
Yeah.
So this situation that Lalo is describing about the tension and the release, he's totally right. And I think it's even more evident in the New Orleans version, which we're going to sample later. I think you're going to hear in that version how the song was even more cathartic in its rough sketch version.
Lalo, thank you for that tension and release from the bass part. The way when you play it in front of me, where I can see it and hear it, it makes sense.
Yeah,
I also saw when you played the you had a big smile on your face. When you went back to the tough part, you were concentrating very heavily. The smile faded.
Is the Claypool effect in bass players? Only him is natural for him because all the bass players we have to concentrate to the intrinsic part.
It sounds like on the record he's using some distortion, a bit.
He's using a distortion, an overdrive. Mm-hmm. Then he used a little bit of envelope filter, like a wah-wah.
Yes, it is. It's a small amount, correct?
Yeah, a small amount, yes.
Yeah, and therefore Frankie is not completely pleased because he wants the full.
Yeah.
You want the full effect, Frankie?
Is that possible?
Frankie wants to turn it all the way up to 11.
But the measure of when you hear Les Claypool Frog Brigade, it's a lot of envelope filter. But in this case, it's not. He takes measure of that effect.
It's controlled. I think it works very well to have this much of it on Little Faces. Just the hint, Frankie. It's okay to have a hint of envelope filter, right? Just a little.
I think envelope filter, you love it or you hate it. It's not between or in the middle. No.
Yeah.
So I suppose Frankie's a envelope lover. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, he loves it. Yes.
Yep.
Frankie, there are other tracks on this record that you'll very much appreciate then, as I recall. The other thing is, Lalo, I mentioned it, the layers, and you said it too. So Stewart at the beginning, Stewart is doing paradiddles.
Paradiddles,
and they're beautiful. Trey has 3 or 4 things he's doing on guitar to build those layers, and so to me, this album sounds larger than your average Les Claypool album, if that makes sense.
And there is another part when I was trying to learning, and I don't know if it's a remembrance of Les when he made the audition to Metallica, because it's a lot. Is for me, it's a lot like Master of Puppets, because. There is a part. It's like this.
Yeah.
then when you slow it down, it's a lot like a Master of Puppets of Metallica. I don't know if I don't think so that Les was thinking about Metallica, but to me, it's reminding, yeah.
I think that is after the first verse and chorus, as I recall.
You're right.
There it is. It's similar.
That's amazing,
yeah.
Lalo. That's why we have musicians like you here, because Josh and I would never have picked up on that. That is incredible.
I would have.
Oh.
No, you're absolutely right, Lalo. It sounds very similar. That's a fast thumb. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's a fast thumb, but it's very natural because the movement is the same, and it's just descending chromatically. But it's more natural or more easier to. It's the same. It's just descending chromatical.
Same pattern, descending.
Same pattern, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like something only Les would do.
Yeah. You're right.
Now they're playing with each other. It's Les's turn to play, and he plays that. They all get a turn in this. It's
the perfect mix. The perfect mixture, yeah.
I also, at Frankie's request, I will play the chorus because it does build. And this, once again, is a bit different for something that Les is contributing to here. Building. And so that builds through that chorus, and we get vocal harmonies from Trey.
Yeah. Actually, Trey is the principal voice.
Yeah. So between the two of them, they're harmonizing, and it sounds really great. You don't often hear, Les is almost always the only vocalist, but here we have two voices, and they're harmonizing, and it's wonderful.
Just my opinion, but I enjoy this more. Is more natural for me because you you hear Trey taking the principal voice and Les taking the second voice, but they sound great.
Yes.
Really, really curious, Josh, about what you'll make of the New Orleans jazz version, because on this studio recording, you have this release, there is some catharsis in the coda, but it kind of dissipates, it builds and then it kind of fades away.
Mm-hmm.
But on the New Orleans version, there's aggression, it's really, really compelling. So I'm really looking forward to you guys listening to that version in a few minutes.
Yeah, okay. I will play the studio version, the payoff, as I like to call it, in the last minute.
Your favorite part.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it does fall apart into kind of a dreamy ending. This whole song, to me, has a dreamy quality to it. It's not very aggressive or heavy, although Lalo, you showed us some fairly aggressive bass playing, but overall, to me, the song is quite dreamy, as if somebody is laying back and thinking about how much they love their kids and all the funny things they do. But let's listen to and once again, this is songwriting that we, up to this point, we hadn't really heard from Les. So he's making the most of this trio here. Yep. And it goes back into Dreamtime. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, it has a payoff. It does build to something. And to me, we see that come back around with Primus for Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People. They are creating songs that build to something.
Lalo, besides the music, Josh and I already talked about the lyrics. Does this song speak to you on a personal level, considering you have 2 kids?
I don't know what is the meaning of the song. I have to Google and some people say it's about children, about the Claypool children.
Yes.
And others say that is the liquid.
Oh yes, I've heard that alternative interpretation, but no, yeah. It's about Les and Trey bonding over their kids, and the things they have in common as fathers. And that particular lyric, "Little faces keep no track of time," is about how time passes by so quickly when you have children and you see them growing up.
Yeah, it's and I can feel it in the growth of Claypool when he was single and then married and then father. When you told me that, yes, I can see now that it is. I can imagine Les reading bed stories for his kids.
Yep.
For bedtime, and when you are a child, you can see a lot of things with lights and darkness and shadows, and I can remember when I was 6 years old, I saw goblins or little people in my closet. So
yeah.
Maybe it's something like that.
Monsters under the bed or in the closet.
Yeah, yes. Monster on the
yeah, exactly.
You're right. Oh, thank you for explaining me, because I was you can expect all of from Claypool. You can expect all.
Yeah. Well, let's hear that. I Am Oysterhead, the first show. We're going to hear some parts that became portions of Little Faces.
We have multiple parts to sample, so let's take a look at the first portion.
I remember this.
Oysterhead.
I love this lick coming up. It is a damn shame they never used that on the record.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely. I mean, this is almost unrecognizable as far as Little Faces go, right?
Right. It's chugging along. It's nothing like we hear on the record, but then
that lick is incredible. Yeah,
I love that.
Shame. It's a shame it didn't make it to the record.
Yeah, it chugs along like a train. And then it transfers to this.
He's doing the lyrics on the guitar. He's playing the lyrics on the guitar.
Yes.
The voice he's doing in his guitar.
Yeah. And and we hear it on the record too. So that little melody made it to Little Faces. The bass line is
It's in the same key. It's
Yeah.
E minor, but it's a lot different.
he's keeping the boom boom bam. So he's hitting a different thing there.
Yeah.
So we have some elements that they're going to use on the record.
Now you're going to hear how the lyrics were completely different, incredibly far removed from what Little Faces became. So we're going to sample a little bit of the verse and the chorus.
Where the gentle breath of ocean freezes with it on the shore and the air and the flow of the tide lovingly caress the silver sands. There is a time when the diverse elements of the universe come together in harmony and unite the quintessence of all things.
Never trust a band named Oysterhead. Never trust a band named Oysterhead. I am Oysterhead till the day I die.
I'm glad they changed the lyrics too.
It's a surprise and gifts when you go to concerts and you hear something never sung before and after.
Yes, that was the one time they played it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't done this show and they had gone straight to the studio, we would never have heard this piece of music.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fun to hear how it's changed. Now, this next portion, Frankie, just says thick.
Oh, yes. This part is thick with capital letters.
I keep wanting this part to resolve to the chorus that's on the record, but it doesn't.
No. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. There's all tension, no release. So
We
strange.
get to the release a bit later.
Unless is having fun with. It's wow.
Good ear. You picked
It's
that
my
up
job.
in 1 minute.
That's incredible.
I'm loving this version. Frankie was right.
Yeah.
I'm loving this version. It's incredible. It's amazing.
It has a big sound, and it chugs along. And then here's the outro.
He's having fun with E minor.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
I want them to make a new record, and I want that to be the first lick on the first track. It's so good.
Yeah, like a good hamburger, cheese
Yes.
burger.
Yes. It's meaty.
Yeah, and juicy.
Yes. Perfect description. Tengo hambre. Now, that is fun to compare because we heard some elements that made it to record and many that didn't. Let's hear this live cut, Frankie. This is from Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's the Hollywood Palladium 2001, and it's the show that is featured in the 5 Gallons of Diesel DVD.
Ah, yes.
A portion was actually broadcast back in the day. There's a stop-start dynamic in the live version that is also absent from the studio cut.
So we heard its primordial beginnings.
Yeah.
Then we heard the studio version. Now we will hear how they progressed it to a live version after the record.
Yes, because the studio cut kind of fades away, and I guess they needed something more compelling for the live renditions. So here you get like an actual catharsis.
Payoff time. Oh my gosh, this is so fast. I was mostly listening to Stewart Copeland. He can rip. And they played that 22 times faster than they do on the record.
They double the time. Double the time.
What a live cut. I forgot that. I think a lot of these tracks, Frankie, they brought up the tempo live, correct?
Yes. I guess as a result of all the jamming and the improvisation during the tour, they needed something compelling to finish up the tracks.
Much like we have heard from the Frog Brigade this year and in years past, finding ways to end songs that fade out or just kind of end. So now we have a definite ending to it. And
it's
I did
a concrete ending.
Concrete ending. And I really love the...
you know, that reminds me Beat It of Michael Jackson Beat It.
Oh, yeah.
Remind me, is not the same, but
it is. It makes you think of that. Fascinating. I would not have thought of Beat It, but you thought of Beat It. That's excellent. Wow. Thanks for that live cut, Frankie. That one sounds great.
You can hear the crowd getting crazy.
They like it when Oysterhead plays fast. We have one more. Our friends in La Special actually played some Oysterhead in a live show way back in 2019. If you would like to view La Special playing Oysterhead, search for that on YouTube. You can see the entire show.
Our good pals.
Put me in the night and deep into my head without a sound. Little faces keep no track of time.
Rory.
Little faces speaking out in rhyme. Little faces smiling in my mind.
How'd Luke do, Lalo? He sound good on bass?
Yeah, that is more similar like the studio version.
Yeah.
He's doing the tough part though. Yeah, he's doing that.
He's on it.
So it's more similar like the studio version.
Yeah. I always marvel at how Rory sounds so much like Les doing the vocals. He sounds almost exactly
Yeah.
like him. Oh, we should read some Primates takes. We have some, Frankie.
Cool.
If you would like your thoughts read on this podcast, go check out patreon.com/Primus Tracks, one of the many benefits at every tier. TIER, Frankie, not the water that comes out
Not
of your
tears.
the salty water that comes out of your eyes, is the ability to have your thoughts about the track we're talking about read right here on the podcast. So I put out the call as we begin our Oysterhead coverage for thoughts on Little Faces. Eric in Australia says, it is an odd one, but as the tall hog at the trough, it sets the tone perfectly. I think that's his metaphor for it being the big opener. He says, besides Highball, this album is my most favored of the Claypool canon.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow. Big words.
Yeah,
That is something we have to ask the Primates, is rank all of your non-Primus Les Claypool records. Don't do it now, don't send it to us, but we'll ask in the near future. Frankie, our friend Trish says, this is such a funky jam. Also, did you know Stewart Copeland did the music for the original Good Burger movie? No, I did not.
No.
She says...
Trish does love her jamming, right?
I think she loves her good burgers, too. So does Lalo. Big, meaty burger.
This is Crochet Trish, right?
Yes, crocheting Trish, needlepoint
fantastic.
Trish.
Fabulous.
She says there's a good... She says there's a Good Burger 2 coming out this month, but I didn't see any mention of him on that one. Oh, poor Stewart. Jordan Kahn says it's a perfect kickoff that seems equal parts Trey and Les. They both had young kids around the same ages, and it's a wonderful, wholesome theme before the album turns dark.
Oh, yes.
He says, that said, leave it to these geniuses to make something as universal as raising children sound so sinister and psychedelic. He ends with, I especially love the trippy intro and harmonies on the chorus. So do I. John Shreve says, to me, this was even more of an indictment on Les's jam era than Live Frogs. We took a road trip to Coos Bay from Oceanside when it came out, which included a speeding ticket with active smoke, a blown radiator hose, and an encounter with a large ape, a helpful hippie had since the 60s, he claimed. Little faces smiling in my mind are memories of that trip. So John Shreve had a lot of car trouble and met an ape while listening to Oysterhead for the first time. That is outstanding. And finally, Brooks Delight says, I wasn't sure what to expect from this project. I don't think anybody did. When I sat down at my first listen, I was happy to immediately go to space. Then Copeland comes in with a strong backbeat, and Claypool locks in shortly after. And this is why I came. That rhythm section is a beautiful thing. It's not my favorite song on the album, but I think the line, sticky fingers clutch forbidden things, might be my favorite lyric on the album. Brooks Delight. Thank you for that. Great takes from our Primates. Thank you all so much for that.
Thank you, guys. Very enjoyable.
Closing thoughts. I'll start. Yes, the music, the lyrics, the payoff, it all comes together. But what I really appreciate is that we get to compare it to what it was the first time they ever played it. It is a very dreamy tune. First time listening in a long time.
Yeah, me too. And amazing to see and hear the evolution of the song in studio and concert, the crowd, the evolution of the song.
Lyrically, I'm glad they modified the song to what it became on the record. Not because there's anything wrong with the original version, but it would have been strange to have two songs about the same topic on the album, right? It might have taken some of the compelling quality of Mr. Oysterhead away from the song. And that's the theme song. So I'm glad Little Faces became something entirely different. It is the perfect opener. It sets the mood of the record in a really fantastic way. But musically speaking, I think the original version is superior.
That is one of the tunes they wrote in the small amount of time they had together.
Which speaks volumes about their talent.
how quickly it came together. So I can say this, Little Faces, we've been keeping time, and you've been tracked. Next time, Frankie, how do you feel about sensory deprivation?
It means the world to me, Josh. Lalo, thank you so much for your insight and your talent on this track. It is much appreciated, and we really, really admire how you can pick up what Les is doing in the songs. It's really incredible.
No, thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure and nice to be with you.
Thanks a lot, Lalo. Very impressive stuff. Lalo, what's your Instagram?
Lalo Fierro.
There you go.
Lalofiero.
Oh, that's right. It's an R, so it's Lalo Fierro.
R. Yeah.
Yes.
That profile, Josh, has been reported multiple times for base porn. It's what Lalo posts on his profile is basically base pornography. So
That's why it's been reported so many
it's
times.
been reported multiple times. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Lalo, clean it up. Yes. Lalo's at Lalo Fierro on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's not safe for work. Nicely done. Later days.
Willie Mays.